Good evening, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown in Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer, for another China Rising Radio Sinoland podcast, video, article, etc. I'm drinking fermented pu'er tea that we bought in Xishuangbanna on the Laotian border in Yunnan over a National Day holiday in October. It's really cool to be drinking tea from plants that we actually saw, and it's organic too, so I'm really enjoying it. As usual, tons of hyperlinks, so go to the original article that I will post with YouTube and SoundCloud so that you can read the words while you listen to me, and glad you could join me tonight. Tonight's podcast is kind of anecdotal. It's just something that happened to me in the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to share it with you because I think it's very emblematic of what all of us are up against with the mainstream propaganda. Its title is "A Funny Thing Happened in the Library Today." First, a note for everybody: when finishing reading, listening to, and/or watching this column and podcast, sharing is caring about humanity's future and getting the non-mainstream truth out to a wider audience. Please tell your family, friends, and colleagues about China Rising Radio Sinoland. Post and follow it on all your social media. Sign up for the email alerts on this blog page so that you don't miss a beat. Then read the China trilogy to understand your world and where you are headed into the 21st century. You will be so glad that you did. All right, let's get started with the body of the article tonight. As a follow-up to the last column, I have a funny and revealing story to tell. It really frames well what Westerners are up against to get to the reality of human existence as they try to sift through all the mainstream propaganda and a lifetime of brainwashing at school. Today, I was at our library, and a Western colleague was reading the Shenzhen Daily newspaper. The school receives about 15 to 20 copies every day that are available to all. I told my colleague about my last piece, how I discussed the importance of reading a locale's newspapers and at least reading the headlines to get a flavor of the place. I showed how I chose front page headlines as a benchmark to find themes. In today's issue, the headline blares, and the she is XI for the president of China. She thought proposed to be included in Constitution. As I pointed to this headline, my colleague replied with an air of superiority and a slight smirk on the face. "Yeah, isn't that ridiculous?" Mind you, this person has lived over 10 years in China, and like me, when I was here the first time, 1990 to 1997, they have absorbed next to nothing about Baba Beijing, the Chinese people, and their 5,000-year civilization. I was just as brainwashed and ignorant as this person back then for the same reason: the unspoken, subconscious belief in my white Euranglo-land superiority. I recently wrote about a trainer in a professional meeting who acted the same way in front of a room full of Chinese. I see and hear it every day. Just last week, another colleague in the library saw me looking at a New York Times front page headline that was shouting anti-communist, socialist, agitprop about Baba Beijing, and which surely came right out of CIA central casting. This person has also lived for many years in China, yet said, "Look at what the government here is trying to do now." My gosh. Western racism and its resulting blind ignorance runs deep, and 99% of the time, Euranglo-landers are oblivious to what they are saying or doing, nor do they understand how important the historical perspective is. It is pervasive and endemic in the vast majority of Caucasians, including most of them who have lived and worked overseas, even for many years. But I digress. The irony of my first colleague's comment is how wrong they truly are. Any change that Baba Beijing makes to China's national constitution will likely have a direct influence on every Westerner's economic well-being and lifestyle in the years to come. I can guarantee you that it is still the case for Maoism and Deng Xiaoping theory, which were enshrined in China's constitution. They have both reverberated across the headlines and through the halls of geopolitics and economic influence across the planet, going back decades, and with their history-changing impact on world affairs. But this is largely unrecognized and denied in the self-centered, self-absorbed West. Two other Chinese presidents, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, did not get their names attached to their platforms, but their visions are right there in the Constitution and have also quietly had an ongoing impact on international affairs, your economic well-being, and resulting lifestyle. Jiang's is called The Three Represents, and Hu's is known as Scientific Outlook on Development. These are not just policy speeches, a rousing, self-serving State of the Union speech, or a parliamentary back rub. From Mao to Xi, these are comprehensive and far-reaching blueprints to help guide the Communist Party of China, known as the CPC, the government at all levels, from Zhongnanhai down to faraway villages and their 1.4 billion citizens for the next 5 to 10 years, socially, economically, politically, and geopolitically. I wrote extensively about China's constitution in book number 3 of the China trilogy and encapsulated it in an article I was commissioned to write for the All China Review. China's constitution is at least as important in the course of human events as America's Constitution, Britain's Magna Carta, and France's Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. While the three Western documents are worshipped in mainstream media and the halls of education as sacrosanct, China's magnificent version is totally ignored for a simple reason. China is communist, socialist, and its constitution is proudly and vocally anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, and anti-capitalist. So the joke is on my library neighbor and every other world citizen who fails to put into proper perspective China's critical post-liberation role in history and today's headlines. Informed fans of China Rising Radio Sinoland can set themselves apart from this broad propaganda ignorance, so please recommend this site to friends, family, and colleagues to help them get smart. One cannot make the world a better place when totally oblivious. To close out, extra, read all about it! T-Bone Burnett is well known for his studio production prowess, but he has put out a great catalog of music and is a singer-songwriter whom I have admired for decades. Here is a quirky song about newspapers, or at least a very special one dreamed up in his often zany imagination. It is a humorous story of greed and redemption, so enjoy the headlines in The Strange Case of Frank Case and the Morning Paper from his album entitled Talking Animals, and there is also a link for the lyrics below. That's it, fans of China Rising Radio Sinoland. Thank you for joining in and listening to what I have to say. Be back soon. Have a wonderful weekend, and all the best.